It's happening. The seed catalogs have started showing up in the mail. Your favorite YouTubers are doing seed hauls, and you're starting to wonder, is it time to start seeds already? Gosh, I just started getting into the holiday spirit here. Am I too late? What should I be doing? Well, that's what today's video is about, to help you kind of set your mind at ease so that you are well prepared for an amazing upcoming gardening season and still get to enjoy the holidays. Hey folks, if we haven't met before, my name is Tara. I garden in the Bay Area, and no, I normally do not wear a hat indoors, but my microphone performs a lot better when it's stuck on my hat. Plus, my hat says something really cool. Feed the soil, feed the world. Never a truer word was spoken. So today, let's talk all about how to prepare, what you should be buying, what you should be thinking about, what should you be doing to gather all your supplies so that you are ready to start seeds, and also how do you prepare yourself to know when to start what seeds for the upcoming gardening season, as well as for the current one, if you live in a all year round gardening climate like I do over here in the Bay Area. Okay, so here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about when to start seeds. I'm going to give you a core framework that should work no matter where you live. Then let's talk about what seeds you can start right now, whether to start indoors or whether you want to direct sow outdoors. And we'll talk about what equipment do you actually need versus what is optional, nice to have, versus what you really don't need. And then I will also get into some of the planting and planning mistakes that you need to avoid, especially if you're early in your journey of planting seeds. But before we get into the academics, I want to show you all the seeds that I've been buying so far. Okay, I'm going to admit it. I am a little bit of a seed hoarder. I've got lots and lots of boxes of seeds, and this is not even all of it. So, yeah. Do as I say, don't do as I do. And yeah, there are some addictions, but hey, could be worse, right? Let's show you my seeds. Things to avoid. The Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Catalog. No, you have to get this, you guys. Don't buy all of it, but oh my goodness, look at all these beautiful pictures, especially for those cold, dark days. This really adds a lot of sunshine to your life, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, by the way, I am growing Louisia from seed. This is such a pretty succulent plant, supposed to be very challenging to grow, but hey, I am up to it. All right. Let me show you my seeds. Let's start with Baker Creek. Verbena. Now, if you guys have been following my green stock journey, you know how much in love I am with creeping verbena. I've got about 3 or 4 colors and I had to get more. And snapdragons are also a new love that I discovered a couple of years ago. And since then, I have been hoarding snapdragons. They come in 2 heights. They come in the taller heights and then they come in the shorter heights, like 12 inches and under. And the shorter ones I put in my green stock. The taller ones are growing all over my garden. There's one actually from Johnny Seeds called Madame Butterfly that is like a double petal snapdragon. So pretty. I can't wait to grow these. And then yarrow is another very interesting flower that I've been growing in my garden. For some reason, I don't have all these nice bright colors. I've got yellows and pale pinks, so I got some darker colors as well. I'm really hoping to get some reds in this mix. And then, oh yeah, coreopsis. I try to add more perennials to my garden every year. Coreopsis is one of them. And yeah, they're just very, very pretty flowers that are very drought tolerant. Rudbeckia is another one of them, another perennial flower that just, oh gosh, this thing goes on and on and on. The blooms never fade, it feels like. And then, oh, these are the free seeds that I got, carrots and a new kind of winter lettuce that I've never tried so far. This is for my summer plantings, my marigolds and moringa. Now, I've grown moringa before. It's an extremely nutritious tree, little mini tree, and it produces these seed pods that are very nostalgic to me. I grew up eating them a lot when I was a kid. Cosmos rubenza. Apparently, the picture is not as good as the actual flower. I've seen pictures that people have posted about this beautiful cosmos. Can't wait to grow it. And then coleus. I have a lot of coleus plants, but somehow I lost some of the colors along the way. I grew them all from seed for the most part. So I got the same one again. I've grown this mix before, but I got this again because I want to restore some of the ones that I don't have anymore. Now, Johnny seeds I really love as well. In addition to Baker Creek being the heirloom seeds, Johnny seeds actually has a lot of really great hybrids. We talked about Madame Butterfly already, but there are many others that I've been making a list. This is Mini Love Watermelon. Someone recommended it. This one is a petunia. I grew petunias from seed for the first time last year, and I was amazed at how easy they were to grow. So, doing that again. This Edox tomato, so I learned about this from Scott from Black Gumbo Southern Gardening, and he grew these. Oh my gosh, they were absolutely phenomenal, perfect little cherry tomatoes on a long cascade. And Unagi F1 is hybrid cucumber. It is one of those self-pollinating cucumbers. I like to grow more and more of those. I feel that they are so much easier to grow. And then zinnias. Can't get enough of those. I'm getting the shorter varieties, the double Sahara, and oh, this is another cucumber, but this one is a short variety that should grow really well in the green stock. And then I've got a bunch from botanical interests as well, and I'm going to actually save these for a future video because I've got a little surprise that I want to share with you guys about those. And here, of course, are my seeds. And like I said, this is only part of my collection, but this is where most of my favorite ones are. You can see I've used a lot of the green stock stickers for this. These photo boxes are really great, actually, but just know that there are two different qualities that I have purchased. These I actually got from Amazon. I'll put a link to these. These are solid. These I got from Michael's, and they often go on sale on Michael's, but they're not as good quality. The boxes are a lot more flimsy. So just be aware that the ones from Michael's, I don't know whether they've got more than one brand, but the ones that go on sale, not as good quality as the ones from Amazon, which I will link in the description. So this box over here, you can tell a little bit from the pictures that I've put on it what's inside. Not necessarily consistent, but yeah, I try. But this is most of my cool season. The little blue masking tape that I've put indicates very quickly for me that this is a cool season plant. That's a little tip for you. And of course, I didn't have enough cool season plants, clearly. So I have a lot of my summer veggies also over here. And these are, my tomatoes and peppers occupy a lot of space. So do the beans. So all of these are summer crops. And then I've got my flowers. And the way that I've organized my flowers is kind of more alphabetically. You can see that this doesn't hold as well. If I overfill it too much, it just pops right open. And yeah, even this little tab thingy is not as sturdy as the ones that I got over here. These are just so much more strong and better. Anyway, so flowers in these boxes, and I just keep filling them up with more and more flowers. I gotta stop. I can't. But then again, I could have much more expensive addictions that I don't. So that's how I treat myself. All right, let's talk about a framework to help you understand when to plant what seeds. Now, remember, vegetables and flowers come not just from seeds, they also come from corms and tubers and rhizomes and bulbs and things like that. But we're going to give special attention to seeds today. We'll talk a little bit about the others as well. Now, everything centers around what's called your last frost date, your average last frost date. Has nothing to do with your gardening zone. That's more of a hardiness zone. So say, for example, I'm in gardening zone 9B. That's my plant hardiness zone, which means it tells me what plants I can grow that will survive my winter, taking into account the lowest temperature that my winter can get to. Now, my last frost date has nothing to do with my gardening zone. Yeah, maybe closely aligned in the sense that a last frost date for a warmer gardening zone is a little sooner than that for a colder gardening zone. But other than that, there is no real direct relationship when it comes especially to figuring out when to plant seeds. Okay, so let's talk about your average last frost date. Why is it called an average? The reason is because it can happen a little bit sooner or it can happen a little bit after. They've taken the average over many years and said, this is approximately when you can expect to have your last frost. Now, I usually use the 2-week number. So I tell myself my frost date, my last frost date can happen 2 weeks sooner than my average last frost or 2 weeks after. So let's be safe and let's assume that it's 2 weeks after. And that's usually what I go for when I'm thinking about planting things like frost-sensitive plants, tomatoes and things that cannot handle even a little bit of frost, I will put them out later than my average last frost date. 2 weeks later is what I usually go for as a rule of thumb. But we'll talk more about transplanting outside in another session. I'm going to have a series of these videos talking about preparing for your seed starting, actually doing your seed starting, maintaining your seedlings up to when you can put them outside, and then finally transplanting them outside as well. So we'll have several videos that we will talk about all of these topics. Today is going to be focused mainly on just prepping for the time when you're going to be planting your seeds. Okay, so how do you consider a last frost date when it comes to figuring out when to plant your seeds? Well, one quick way to do it is just to look at your seed packet. There's usually a lot of really good information at the back of your seed packet. So, for example, over here, it tells you very clearly planting instructions: sow indoors 3 to 4 weeks before last frost for transplants, or you can do direct seed after the last spring frost. So if you want to get a head start, you want to start indoors. Now, I would actually recommend that over and beyond what's on the seed packet, you actually go to the company's website and look up the particular seed in question, because they usually have a lot more information on it. They can only fit that much into the real estate over here, but it's some really good information. It also tells you how soon you can expect the seed to sprout, the ideal temperature under which it grows, seed depth, plant spacing, whether it's frost hardy or not. This one is a no. And then how many hours of sunshine it needs in order to bloom. So you know that this one needs a minimum of 8 to 12 hours. So you'll have to figure out where in your garden you can plant where you've got that much sunshine. Anyway, back to figuring out when to plant your seeds. I usually have 3 rough ranges that I look at when I think about seed planting. So the first is 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost date. Now, this is the time that you're going to be planting herbs, perennial flowers, and usually things that take a long, long time to grow. And here's a little tip that I kind of figured out myself over the years: is it's usually the tiniest seeds that take the longest time to get to a size where they can be transplanted. I mean, yes, it kind of seems obvious. The tinier seeds will create teeny tiny little seedlings that will take a while to grow. But yeah, just think about it that way. The larger the seed, the less time it needs to produce a plant that is large enough to go outside. The smaller seeds takes a while. Things like thyme, as an example, or snapdragons, or just a lot of seedlings that produce such tiny things. They're like no more than dust size, when they start to sprout. And those will take it's almost take like forever. And forever is usually at least about 10 to 12 weeks. That's like 4 months before your last frost date. So keep that in mind. For me, as an example, my last frost date is roughly end of March. So I am already in that range of 10 to 12 weeks. So I had better be starting a lot of my perennial flower seeds and a lot of my herb seeds that will take a long time to grow. Basil is a little bit different. It grows a little bit faster, but something like thyme takes forever to grow. Now, one more thing also for you to be aware of, which very often does not show up on the seed packet, is whether or not the seeds would benefit from what's called cold stratification. So think about it. Sometimes you grow plants that just grow more naturally in places where there are long winters. So the seeds are buried under snow potentially, or just sitting in really, really cold soil for months on end before they sprout. Now, in warmer climates, it's actually not that common to have that length of time that the seed can sit in the soil and be cold. And that's why you may need to refrigerate certain seeds. Things like lavender, as an example, benefits dramatically from being cold stratified. Cornflowers, milkweed, there's a long list of flowers that actually benefit from cold stratification. So do make sure that you look on the website. If it doesn't say so on the packet, look to see whether or not it benefits from cold stratification, because I'll tell you, it makes a dramatic difference as to whether or not your seed is even going to sprout if you don't give it that cold stratification period. All right, so we talked about the 10 to 12 week time frame. One more thing that usually happens in that time frame is also your cool weather crops. Remember, you're starting to get into planting the warmer weather crops when you get into the 6 to 10 week time frame, but you still have spring in front of you, winter and spring, and you want to be able to grow cool weather crops. There are some cool weather crops like radish and turnips that grow really, really fast, spinach, but then there are some cool weather crops that actually take a long time to produce their product. And their product could be a head of broccoli or a head of cabbage or a head of cauliflower. Those take a long time. In fact, the flower, which is the broccoli head, is the end of the life cycle of the plant. Think about it. The plant grows, produces leaves, and then finally produces a flower, and the flower produces seeds. So forming a head is really the end of the life cycle of most brassicas. Not for radish, on the other hand, that's a root crop. But for the crops that actually form the heads, which are the flowers, those are going to take a lot longer. So for me, particularly because I live in a warmer climate, I can't even wait for the 10 to 12 week time frame to start some of these crops. I've got to go way back. I've got to go way back to like July or August to start those if I really want to have a good winter crop that has a nice head of whatever the vegetable is. If I take a chance and I wait a little bit and I start at, say, now in December, and I'm hoping for a spring harvest, I am taking a chance. It's 50-50. I may or may not get a head of cauliflower, say, because what happens is my spring is like that. It happens, and then before you know it, the weather has heated up. And once the weather heats up, those flower spikes that are starting to form, the heads, they actually do what's called bolting. They produce a huge flower spike, and then they produce seeds, and the plant is over. And you can't really harvest after it produces the flowers. It doesn't taste as good, and a broccoli is not a broccoli if it's a head of yellow flowers now, is it? Now, if you live in a cooler climate, you've got much more leeway as far as when you start your cool weather crops from seed, because you've got longer cool days than we do over here in the warmer climates. So you have a lot more wiggle room. What you don't have as much wiggle room as we do in the warmer climates is when you start your warm weather crops. So let's talk about that. All right, so now we are getting into the 6 to 10 week time frame and what seeds you should be planting. Now, one kind of rule of thumb that you need to think about when it's cool weather crops versus warm weather crops is the cool weather crops are usually grown for the flowers, like I said, broccoli, cabbage, etc., even lettuce. The head of lettuce is the end of the life cycle. That's when it forms that head and then bolts and produces the flower spike, right? So yeah, cool weather crops are usually grown for the leaves or for the roots, radish, turnip, etc. Now, there are a few exceptions. Peas, as an example, are grown for the fruit, right? The pea pod. But most of them are grown for either the leaves or the shoots or the roots, the root crops. Now, summer crops, on the other hand, are grown for the fruits. Your tomatoes, your eggplants, your peppers, your beans, they're all grown for the fruit. And to grow fruits, they require plenty of sunshine. So this is where people who live in warmer climates with milder winters have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that they've got a wider range that they can start seeds. So say, for example, I can start seeds with my last frost date being roughly end of March. I need to start my tomato seeds roughly in the early February timeframe, say about 8 weeks before my last frost date. But gosh, I have started tomatoes all the way through June and still gotten a harvest because my growing season is just so very long. So I don't have to stress at all about starting my tomatoes right on time in February, right? On the other hand, people who live in cooler climates and correspondingly shorter growing seasons do need to be on top of when they start their, say, tomato seeds because their growing window is so short. They want to maximize every bit of sunshine that they can get before the cold weather hits again. So speaking of root crops, let's talk a little bit about the tubers and corms and bulbs and things like that. So these are also crops that you can start in the cooler weather. In fact, they prefer the cooler weather. Things like potatoes, as an example. You do want to start them in the cooler season, maybe a little bit before your frost date. I'd say up to a month or so before your last frost date, you can plant your potatoes. Don't plant them too early, because if you've got a lot of heavy frost hitting your plants as they start to sprout, it's going to knock the potato plant back. There'll be more eyes on the potato and they will grow, but each of those sprouts that gets killed is energy from the potato that was wasted, right? So don't go too early on planting your potatoes. Wait till you're about maybe a month or so before your last frost date and then get your potatoes in. But then you've also got other bulb crops, things like garlic, as an example, shallots, onions. Onions you can start from seed or you can get transplant sets. Whole different topic. I'm not going to deal with onions today because it is just a little bit more complicated than the others and lots more choices and a lot more factors to have success with onions. But potatoes are super easy to grow. Garlic is actually pretty easy to grow. And usually you can plant garlic in the ground until your soil is not workable anymore. In fact, in the cooler climates, you don't want to go too early, because what will happen is garlic will start producing those shoots, and then your frosts hit and it just damages your crop, right? On the other hand, for me, I can grow garlic. Softneck garlic is what I grow best over here. And I can grow it right through my winter. They do not skip a beat. They will grow. And in fact, the earlier I plant it, the longer time it'll have to produce those green shoots, and correspondingly, the larger the size of the bulb that it produces. Now, your tomatoes, your peppers, your cucumbers, your other warm season crops, that you want to start planting from seed a little bit closer to your last frost date. So let's talk first about the 6 to 10 weeks before your last frost date. This is the time that you really want to get your tomatoes in. You want to get your peppers going. In fact, with peppers, the hot peppers, I'd suggest you start even sooner. So say, for example, maybe 10 weeks or even 12 weeks before your last frost date, you can start those hot peppers, because they traditionally take a lot longer to grow from seed, a lot longer to sprout, and then a lot longer to grow compared to the sweeter peppers or the milder peppers. So yeah, peppers do take a little bit longer to grow, so get those started much sooner than tomatoes. They also grow a lot slower. Tomatoes grow really fast once they are given the right conditions. And then eggplants, I'd actually wait till a little bit after the tomatoes. That's what I usually do, because eggplants are one of those things, just like peppers. If you get them in the ground too soon, they actually get stunted. Tomatoes don't usually get stunted. They just kind of wait till the warm weather comes and then they take off. But peppers and eggplant, if you get them in the ground when it is too cold, they will actually get stunted and they won't produce for you, or they won't produce as well. But we'll talk more about stunted plants when we talk about transplanting. But my point over here is you want to start your peppers a little sooner than your tomatoes, and your eggplants a little bit after your tomatoes. And then there are other plants like okra and things like that that are better off direct seeding, and we'll get into direct seeding in a little bit. So I hope you're also noticing that the seeds are starting to get a little larger in size as you're getting closer to that last frost date. And now, speaking of the really large seeds, you get to that 2 to 4 week period before your last frost date. That's when you're planting things like cucumbers and squash and maybe even beans, though I would recommend that you direct sow your beans. And let's see what else. Corn. Yeah, corn, I'd also recommend that you direct sow. But if you want to start indoors, I'd suggest that, squash is a good candidate for that, because it likes really, really warm soil. Again, we'll discuss more about soil temperature when it comes to transplanting. But yeah, squash, cucumbers, and things, if you want to get a head start, you want to get some squash quite early in the season, you want to maybe start it indoors before your last frost date, but no more than 2, 3, 4 weeks before your last frost date, because those things grow fast. They sprout fast and they grow fast, and you're going to have all these huge plants and the temperature outside is still freezing and you can't get them outdoors. So yeah, be patient when it comes to planting squash and cucumbers. Don't rush it too much. And that's one of the mistakes that early gardeners make, is starting a lot of their seedlings too soon. And we'll talk more about that as well in just a bit. All right, now let's talk about what seeds you can plant right now. So, depending on where you live, you will be starting different seeds, obviously. Now, the best way to find out what seed you can start now is to download a planting calendar. One of the best resources for planting calendars, especially if you live in North America, is go to your local master gardener extension. Most states, in fact, probably all states, have as part of their university extension. So, say, for example, over here in California, it's University of California Extension has an agriculture and natural resources program. And as part of that program, they've got a master gardener chapter. Now, this is a wonderful free resource that you can use for any gardening question, literally any gardening question. Can you believe that? There is a help desk, there's a email thing that you can do, and you can get answers, very thoughtful, scientifically based answers to any of your gardening questions. Is that amazing or what? Now, make sure that you take advantage of this wonderful resource that's available to you because it will really help you become a better gardener. And one of the things that all of these extension programs in all the states produce is a planting calendar. So you can either contact your local master gardening chapter, just Google, your zip code and ask what your local master gardening chapter is, and it'll point you to it. Or you can go to resources like almanac.com, I think, is a resource where it actually has planting calendars. You can enter your zip code and it'll tell you what exactly you can plant when. Okay, so when you do get that planting calendar and you start using it, I suggest you actually use a tool. I use Google Tasks. You can use Calendar as well to jot down when you should plant what. So I've got reminders set up for me. Every September 1st, I get a reminder saying it's time to plant my onions. Every February 15th, I get a reminder saying it's time to plant my tomato seeds. Now, you can adjust that over the course of the years as you figure out kind of rhythm for your particular microclimate and what works best. So for me, for example, I actually find that planting tomatoes works better when I start at the end of February. So I have adjusted that date over the course of time. So eventually, you will end up with a customized calendar for your microclimate that you have tweaked over the years, just like I have now. All right, so now let's talk about direct sowing, planting directly in your garden, the seeds, versus starting indoors. When would you do one versus the other? Well, you want to start indoors, particularly for plants that have a long season. So, say, for example, peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, they take a long time to grow, and then they've got a long window during which they produce. And you want to maximize that as much as possible, particularly if you live in a cooler climate. So, definitely, you want to try and start those indoors. The other thing that starting indoors will do is it will also give you a head start before the soil warms. It takes a while for the soil to actually warm up to a temperature that plants enjoy growing in. So, say, for example, tomatoes, I think, require a temperature of at least 65 degrees Fahrenheit, soil temperature. Get a soil thermometer if you don't have one. And you really need to wait until the soil temperature is a particular thing. So 65, for example, for tomatoes, before you get it into the ground. If you get it in too soon when the soil is less than 50 degrees, that tomato plant is just going to sit and sulk and do nothing and kind of get sickly, and then the pests are going to come and eat it. Right? So you want to wait till your soil temperature is right before you get it in the soil. That's another reason why you want to start indoors, because you don't want to have to wait, to plant outdoors. You want a nice, large, healthy plant to put in the soil. And then also, if you want to control things like heat and light and moisture, growing indoors is really good for that. So especially during the latter parts of the season when the weather is either too cold or too hot, depending on where you live, starting indoors protects the plant, the young plant, until the point when you get it in the soil, when the plant is larger and is able to handle any fluctuations a lot better. So what plants can you direct sow? Now, I have this theory that everything can be started indoors and then planted outdoors, even carrots. But usually, you do not want to plant things that do not like their roots disturbed. So, say, for example, a bean plant. It puts down a really long taproot very, very quickly. Even before you see the little bean seed popping out of the ground or out of your seed cell, it has already established a really long root system, which actually is really brittle. So you have to handle it with extreme care because you could easily break that main root. And once that happens, you've killed your plant, right? So things that have a long root system or things that rely on the root system to be their crop, for example, carrots and beets and things, people advise that you should plant those directly. I don't. Carrots, yeah, I do plant carrots directly, though I am experimenting this year with transplanting carrots, so we'll see how that goes. But beets, oh, I can easily transplant beets. I've never had a problem with that. I've had wonderful beet harvests. What else? Turnips, radishes. Now, these things grow so quickly that it almost is not worth it starting from seed indoors and then transplanting them. It's almost like each time you transplant a plant, it sets it back by a week, 2 weeks. And when you have something like radish, a lot of them, like cherry bell radish, they go from seed to actually producing the full size radish in like 25 days. So you don't want to set that back by 2 weeks by transplanting it. So, but my theory is that anything can be transplanted as long as you get it tiny enough. Sometimes I plant them even before their first little true leaves come out, but that's just me. I like to live dangerously. All right, so now let's talk about equipment. What do you really need? What is nice to have? And then what is just fancy schmancy stuff that you really don't need? Okay, so the first thing, and I'll talk about the planting mistakes also as part of this a little bit, because one of the first and probably biggest newbie mistakes that most gardeners make, including myself, is thinking that you've got a bright enough windowsill on which to start your seeds. No, you don't. In fact, that's one of the worst things that you can do to a baby seedling, because no matter how bright your windowsill is, guess what the seedling is going to do? It's going to try to grow towards the light. And when it tries to grow towards the light, it extends its stem. And when it extends its stem, it creates a weak stem. You want short, stocky plants. And the only way you can get short, stocky seedlings is by having your lights right above the seedlings when they are sprouting, like literally right above, within 6 inches. So when it comes to must-haves for starting seeds indoors, you absolutely need to get grow lights. Now, grow lights have an intensity as well as a color specification. There's the lumens and the Kelvins rating, and I can never remember it, so I'll put it on the screen over here. But grow lights, like for example, this one actually has an adjustable thing for your Kelvin. So that's the color of the light. So you can actually change that. So yes, grow lights are an absolutely must-have when it comes to starting seeds indoors. All right, now let's get into optionals. Gosh, I can't believe that that list was so short when it came to what you must have, but the optionals. But these really make a big difference in the growth of the plant as well. So for me, some of these are actually non-optionals, and I'll indicate which ones those are. But yeah, seed starting equipment. Now, you can really start in anything. You do, especially if you're not really sure whether the seed starting thing is the right thing for you. Use anything you have, yogurt containers, whatever, right? They just need to be something that you can put some soil in and start some seeds. So in the next talk, when I'm talking about starting seeds, I'll talk a little bit more about containers and container sizes. But for now, just know that you need something like this size to start seeds in. However, don't go out and buy this stuff. So, for example, these single-use plastics, they're just horrible for the environment, you guys. I'd rather you just reuse something that you've got in your house. Don't spend money on this stuff. They are flimsy, they're one-time use, and they're going to be gone next year. You won't feel like using them anymore. If you're actually going to spend money, buy something that is sturdy, that is going to last you forever and ever. I've got these from Vago Garden. Solid. I mean, I can stand and jump on these. They won't break on me. There's other companies out there as well. Epic Gardening makes good stuff. There's another company called Bootstrap Farmer that makes some really good, solid seed starting trays. But I think Vago Garden is really one of the best that's out there. They've got these little slits on the side that really help the seedlings not sort of circle their roots around and not get root bound. And it really helps with the seedling roots being able to breathe. And so they really help with healthy plants, and they come in various sizes. The one that I'm showing you is actually the jumbo size, but they've got a smaller size, and then they've got a really small size, and then they've got a super large size called Giga. But yeah, invest in some good, solid seed starting trays and use it for the rest of your life. Now, again, if you're not sure whether it's for you or not, then use a yogurt container. Domes. Domes are also very, very helpful because they help keep the humidity inside, particularly when seeds are just starting. They really benefit from a nice, warm, humid environment. So this, again, is optional, but I use them. And if I didn't have something like this, I would actually put a plastic bag or something on it because I feel it makes a big difference in the speed of germination. And speaking of warmth, let me show you one more thing. This over here is a heat mat. Now, most people will say that a heat mat is optional, and they're right. But if you notice over here, they talk about all these various crops and the temperatures that they grow best in. And most seedlings need a temperature of 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, including some of the cooler temperature seedlings like brassicas and stuff. They just grow like in a day, they sprout when you got them on a heat mat. So I really like heat mats because it actually helps, I think, with better germination as well. The seed is not sitting in cold soil for a long period of time, which often results in the seed rotting off. This really makes a big difference. And then one more thing, you absolutely need this. I would actually consider a must have. Everybody else is going to say, no, you can figure out other ways to do it. But yellow sticky traps. Now, one of the biggest problems of starting seeds indoors is that you get what's called fungus gnats, right? These are these little flies that fly around, and they really are just plain annoying, but they actually lay eggs in the soil, and the larvae, they eat up the roots, and then they just cause fungus to develop, and that kills off the seedlings. So that's a big problem, and you really want to get ahead of the problem by hanging these sticky traps, because fungus gnats get stuck on them and have a horrible death. But it'll keep your seedlings protected from the damage that the fungus gnats larvae can cause. And then another optional but really nice to have are these 10-20 trays. Now, most seed starting trays fit nicely in them, and they are made actually to fit nicely in these 10-20 trays. And then you've got the shelves and things that you buy, which are also made to kind of fit. So these trays are made to be kind of standard size for those shelves. So get the sturdy ones. If you get the ones that are cheapos, they will bend and flex. And I can't tell you how many times I've had them break on me, and seedlings have all fallen out, and it's just not been pretty. So get some good sturdy trays because you're going to be using these for a long, long time. I think I've got some from Bootstrap Farmer, makes awesome seedling trays. And Greenhouse Megastore also makes, I think they've got two qualities. One's a little cheaper than the other, but both qualities actually are pretty good. One is just a whole lot sturdier. But I would invest in something like this, these 10-20 trays. They are just, I use them all the time. Particularly for seedlings, you want to bottom water them as much as possible. You don't want to pour water on the top, if at all possible, because moisture on the top causes things like fungal diseases and stuff to form more rapidly. So bottom watering is the way to go, and letting them dry out just a little bit before you water is also very healthy for the seedlings because air is necessary for the growth of the healthy roots. One more thing that I think is very essential and save you a lot of work is having a timer. Now, a lot of plants, when they're in the seedling stage, benefit from longer hours with light and then less hours without light. So, for example, most seedlings, I keep my lights on for 16 hours and then turn it off for 8 hours. And having a timer really helps. So I don't have to remember to do it every day, which I guarantee you I won't. So get a cheap timer. A lot of these smart timers these days can easily be programmed to turn on and off at a certain schedule. So I would recommend that you invest in a smart timer. And then what you don't need are fancy schmancy systems, because if you're a DIY type, you can actually clobber all of these together. But the fancier systems also have the benefit that they are very easy to put together and they look really, really nice. So if you've got a seed starting station that you actually are proud of and you want to display, like the one behind me, then get something nice. Hey, you deserve it. Do you want to take a look and see what's going on in that grow station behind me? Let me show you. So this lovely grow light station is from Vago Garden, and I've got a video where I did a review and how I put it together. It was a piece of cake to put this together, and I absolutely love it. It's got a beautiful grow light, and these are self-watering containers with lettuce. I've got some succulents that I'm starting here. This, by the way, is a microgreens tray, but I am not growing microgreens right now. I showed you guys Louisia. These are the little seedlings. They're little succulents. How adorable are they? I've also got some stuff starting from cuttings. I've got some lettuce seedlings that I'm starting to sprout over here. I've got a whole tray full of all those seeds that I showed you a little earlier, Madam Butterfly and all kinds of other good stuff with the humidity domes on my pretty, pretty green stock seed starting trays. And then at the bottom over here, I have got some cuttings that I am rooting. These are the giga trays. Look how huge they are. So these are painted daisies. I took cuttings from my garden. And I'm also trying to root some of my petunia cuttings. Let's see whether they do okay. They already seem to be telling me that they are not happy in the cold weather. I finally found a use for my Dollar Tree vertical planters. This is like, I got this many years ago, but I've just never been able to use it because my green stalks are just so much better. But I'm using them as propagation stations. I've taken cuttings, put them in here, and I'm hoping that that light is sufficient for the cuttings to take. So we'll see. So I will put a playlist up here, and as I keep producing these videos on seed starting and taking care of your seedlings and then transplanting them into the garden, I will update this playlist with the videos so that you can look at all of them in succession in case you missed some of the prior ones. I hope you enjoyed the video, folks, and let me know in the comments below what seeds you're starting and which part of the world you're watching this video from. Until next time, live green and love your greens, and happy holidays.